Okay, so this is a video that I've been wanting to make for a very long time, and it is in 2025, here is how you can code literally anything you'd like without having any coding ability or experience or skills. So whether you want to make a video game, as was the case for me, or you want to make an app or anything else that may require code, the amazing thing is in 2025, there is a method that you can use to create it. And yes, it is using language models, but there's a right way to go about it and a wrong way to go about it. And I want to share through this video the right way to do it that will work. That is structured, and it's sort of this black box approach that you can use by following this outline that I'll provide totally for free. You just got to watch the video and you'll be able to create whatever you want. And I'm going to do this using emojis primarily because I find a lot of beginner coding videos. They'll say there's no math involved, and then immediately once you see the code, a lot of people get turned off by that because the code is intimidating and you don't want to code, you want an easier solution. So rather than having to hire a consultant or rely entirely on AI, I want to show you sort of this middle approach that you can apply to your own work. And I'm doing so selfishly because if you have come across this video, it means you're an awesome person, and it means you're in my network or you follow cool topics that I also follow. And I want there to be as much cool stuff as possible. And sometimes I find that like the coolest artists or designers or engineers and architects, sometimes they don't really have coding experience. And they often just think, if only I could just, hire a coder to make it, then you'd have so much cooler stuff. And I think a lot of people don't realize, like in 2025 with language models and AI, yes, that is a clickbait sort of trendy cliche topic right now, but it is real. And you can use AI and language models through the right way to create any products that you want. So I want all the geniuses who are coming across this video to make your stuff, make your apps, make your games, make your websites, and use this approach, and we'll promote human flourishing. It'll be a lot greater. Okay, and last but not least, before I get into this, the one caveat overall that I want to make is that I'm going to try to simplify this as much as possible. So for every piece of advice that I'm giving, every approach I'm recommending, there's a million iterations, there's different ways to do it. So there's not necessarily a right way, but if I caveat every single thing with all the different options, all the other approaches, I'll never be able to get through it. So instead, I'm going to distill it down, make it as simple as possible, and I'm just going to boom, 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 tell you exactly what you need to do. Just keep it in the back of your mind that there are other ways to go about this. I'm just simplifying this to make the teaching lesson as easy as possible. Okay, so to start, you're going to need 4 apps to use this approach. And I know it's a little bit annoying to set this up, but once you do it, I promise you this will work, and it's way easier than learning how to code. So you can do this, just follow along, and I promise it is going to work. So you need 4 apps. The first one you're going to need is Google Drive. Most of you probably already have some online text account already, but set up your Google Drive with a Word document. You're going to title this Coding Prompts or Coding Context, coding something. So you're going to need a Word document that's online that you can access easily and frequently. Second thing you're going to need is a language model. If you're a hardcore based conservative, you're going to want to go with Grok because when you pay for it, you get the blue checkmark subscription. If you hate Elon, then you probably want to go with Claude. Both are good. I would recommend you choose either one of those. They're really strong, or ChatGPT or some of the other ones. I use both Claude and Grok. They're both good in my opinion. But you choose. Okay, that's the one source that you can have options on. Let you choose for that. So next, the third thing you're going to need to download is an engine. Now, if you're new to coding and you have no idea what that is, that's okay. That's literally why you're here. All an engine is a thing that is going to actually run the coding that you create through the language model and using your Google Drive. So it's not enough if you have a Word document with a bunch of code on it. If you just hit enter, nothing's going to happen. You actually have to run it through something. So there's a big debate online about what are the best engines, what are the pros and cons of each. We're not going to get into any of that. For the third setup step, all you're going to do is download Unity. It's very developer friendly. It's the one that I made my game with. It's very easy to use this method with it. So go and get Unity for your third step. So the fourth and final step you're going to need is to set up a GitHub account and download the desktop GitHub app. Now, I'm going to link a 7-minute video by Game Dev Garnett. It's sensational for how to actually set up GitHub and link it to Unity. Don't go to it right now. This is, I think it'd be intimidating if you go to it right now. Well, you should go to it after this. I want to show this method first, and it's not hard at all. It's literally 7-minute video. So even though there's a couple steps within there, just imagine if that 7-minute video is the only thing preventing you from coding and achieving all your coding dreams, it's worth it. So I'm just planting the flag here to don't get bogged down on that yet until you're on board with the rest of this approach. Because I think I'm worried if you go there, you're gonna get intimidated and you're not gonna wanna try this. And it's an important aspect of the step, but maybe not the most important. The method overall is important. And once you get you on board with the method, then I think you're gonna be willing to actually put in the time. And I guess the analogy is it's like doing cardio at the gym. You don't have to do cardio at the gym to get a great set of muscles and results. And if you start with cardio when you're new to it, you're gonna get intimidated, you're probably gonna quit. Versus if you just go and lift weights and have a good time and get familiar, then it makes doing cardio way, way, way easier after you've already established the routines and patterns at the gym for an hour. So now that the setup is complete, you should have a Google online doc that is ready to go. You should have a language model account that's been set up. You should have the Unity engine downloaded, and you should have a GitHub account created. You are ready to begin coding without knowing how to code. Step 1 is you're going to open your Google Word doc, and you're going to be creating your first context prompt. So this is a big topic in the AI language model space. Lots of debate about what are the best set of instructions to give your language models to get the best outputs, particularly when it comes to coding. You really don't have to worry about that for right now. in particular because this is changing all the time. There's always updates that are happening to these models. So sometimes the hacks from even 6 months ago no longer apply today. The main thing that you need to focus on is what you're already good at. If you're a designer or an engineer or any type of artist that is trying to code something, but you don't know how to code, but you're probably good at the writing aspects. That's why you're here. You really just want to create a description of whatever your project is. And the key right now is to do it in as few words as possible. Now, there's a bunch of reasons and theories for why this is the case. It has to do with the bandwidth of the language models, and there's a finite amount of tokens. And there's some evidence that suggests that the longer your prompts, the less good or ideal outcomes happen. I won't get into all that here, but essentially for our purpose, what you want to do is just describe your project in as simple as possible. So it could literally just be a sentence or two to begin, and you can build on it as you go along, but you really just want to start and keep it as simple as possible to give the language model an overview of what is the project that it's going to be working on so that it knows what code to give you. Okay, so once you have your context prompt ready to go, you're going to add 3 things to it. At the very top, you're going to say, I'm an amateur coder and I'm using Unity. This will allow the language model to know that it's going to be in C#, which is just the coding language that Unity uses. And it'll ground the language model to know that all of its responses should be very basic because you're saying you're an amateur coder. So that's a good prompt to have. The second thing that you're going to want to put up front is to say, I will require you to give me step-by-step instructions for how to implement every piece of code you provide. Once you get more familiar with the flow of Unity, this will become less important. But because you're new, you'll have the benefit of having Unity be able to give you actual instructions for what to do with it. And there's a little bit of a learning curve, but the language model is the best place to learn it to. So saying, I'm an amateur coder using Unity, and I will require step-by-step instructions for how to implement every piece of code is very helpful because it'll tell you exactly what you need to do. And then the very last thing at the end of your prompt to add is just say, please do not provide any code yet, and just confirm that you understand these instructions and you're ready to go, or something to that effect. This is sort of an outdated thing. I think they'll patch this eventually, but sometimes the language models are too eager to start just pumping out all the code that you want. And when I talked earlier that there is a right way and a wrong way to go about it, the wrong way to go about it is just to try to get the language model to do it in one shot. You do not want that at all. So you want to take the opposite approach, which is a very incremental, slow approach. So at the very end, tell it you do not want it to provide any code as of yet, and just ask for confirmation, because this is then going to set the stage for you to use the actual method that I'll then describe for how to set all this up going forward. All right, so once your context prompt is complete, you're going to hit Control A, which is going to highlight everything in your Word document. Then you're going to hit Control C, which is going to copy it. And then you're going to go and open up your language model, wherever it is. It's online probably. And in the language model box, you're going to drop in and hit Control V to copy over your entire context prompt. And then you're going to hit Enter. Now, because of that last piece that I told you to add to the context prompt about not providing any coding yet and just confirming it, it's probably going to give you a very concise response, and this is good. It'll save tokens, and for a variety of reasons, you don't actually want a very lengthy response right here. You just want it to confirm. And if you've done that, congratulations. This is a very major step, to be honest, and it'll establish the baseline, which we're going to build off going forward. And I told you at the very outset, we're going to use emojis as a teaching tool to fully explain the concept here. So this is going to be our baseline emoji, which of course we're going to use the cool guy with sunglasses as the baseline. So just like I told you, I'm not going to be using code at all to explain anything. Your context prompt from this point forward is just going to be represented by the cool guy sunglasses with emojis, okay? And don't worry if that doesn't fully make sense. You'll see in a moment why I'm doing it this approach. But I want to establish early on that that whole thing, whatever that context prompt is, just like whatever code comes back, it doesn't matter. For the purpose of explaining this approach, it's just going to be represented as an emoji, and in this case, the cool guy with sunglasses. All right, so the next step is you're going to create your first incremental prompt. And to be honest, this is probably the most important step in the entire guide. It is the heart and soul of the prompt engineering or vibe coding approach that I'm going to be outlining here. And to explain why it's so important, I'm going to tell you why most people fail at this stage. So most people fail at this stage because they try to get their language model to do too much all at once. And maybe you have some experience with this. Maybe you've tried to use it before, and whatever it is that you asked the language model to do, it didn't do it exactly how you wanted it to do. Now, it's possible at a later point, the language models will evolve to a point where they can do everything in one blast. I don't think that's going to be possible because I don't think they have souls. I think human beings have souls. It's another topic. But if you think about it really, imagine you have the perfect prompt and you said, hey, make Game of Thrones a 7-book series and involve the War of Roses and fantasy and dragons and elements. No matter what you put in that prompt, it would not be able to create George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones, right? There's just too much specificity, too much context, too much of George R.R. Martin's soul in that prompt, essentially, that unless you were to make the prompt so detailed that you're essentially just rewriting the book itself, in which case it defeats the purpose of the language model, you could never do it all in one blast. And I think that's a useful analogy for how you should approach your incremental prompting. What you should do instead of trying to get your entire app in one go, it's the opposite. You should logically, without using a coding brain, but logically just using your rational mind, distill down what you think the next step is that your game or your app needs, and then ask the language model or your AI to give you the code for that next step. And the key really here, it's not necessarily that it has to be small. It can be a big ask. It can be a big piece of code, but it should really be contained. It should be really isolated to just one piece at a time. You shouldn't be trying to do multiple pieces all at once. You want to just distill down in as simple as possible the easiest, most self-contained prompt that the language model can do. So you're going to put that in your doc, and you're going to add that into the language model, and you're going to ask it to give you the instructions and the code to implement your next incremental prompt and see what the language model gives you. So whatever the language model tells you after your first incremental prompt, you're going to want to follow the step-by-step instructions it provides you to implement whatever it is it tells you. Now remember, your initial context prompt, you've told it you're an amateur coder and you want step-by-step instructions. So it should be basically a paint-by-numbers sort of guide. It should give you one-to-one instructions for how to implement whatever your first incremental prompt is. Now, it may provide coding in this first response, or it may not. It doesn't really matter either way. What you're going to have to do initially is just follow whatever the instructions are using Unity, which is very developer-friendly. There's lots of guides and resources, so it should be very clear. It might take you a little bit to get used to it, but you will be able to do it. Just follow the instructions, and if you need to, you can ask for clarification to the language model. That's totally fine. But whether it gives you coding or not, follow the instructions to a T. Now, if and when your language model finally does provide you with code, what you need to think about is that this is an entirely self-contained entity, and you do not need to analyze it or understand it at all. And this is why, again and again, I'm emphasizing this emoji approach. So whatever code it provides you, don't think about it in terms of the math or the equations or the brackets. Think about it as, this is a thing that the language model has provided me to do whatever the incremental prompt was that I asked for it. And as a metaphor to explain this, we're using emojis. So in this case, you provided an incremental prompt, and let's say it pumped back some code. We're not going to think about what that code is or what it means. We're just going to say, this is the heart emoji code. And for each subsequent piece of code, we're not going to think about the code and the numbers. We're going to assign a emoji to it as our way of thinking about it. And if we need to make changes to the code, we will tell the language model to change the code, and then we'll change it to a different emoji, and that'll then represent that. And what I'm really trying to instill with this approach is you do not need to understand what the specifics of the code are. You only really need to understand the version control and what it is or is not doing. This is also a good spot to pause to confirm that Unity uses scripts for whenever it is doing something that is coding. And oftentimes scripts will each have a different function. So you might have a script to drag and drop items in your game, and then you might have another script that controls the sound or volume of your game. And your language model will typically give you the full script, which is great because this works very intuitively with this emoji approach, because all you're going to do is copy the entire script that the language model provides, and you're going to paste the entire script into Unity. And every time you're going to iterate their script that way. Now, occasionally your language model, particularly when it's running low on tokens or bandwidth, will only give you a portion of the script. It'll give you a method or a section of the code. This, in principle, is still the same. You're just going to be copy-pasting that section and updating that section of your code in Unity. The important thing here, though, is just make sure that you're copy-pasting it over correctly. And to be honest, when you're new, you're probably not going to be very good at that. So one trick you can add to your context prompt to change it up is to say, please provide me with the full scripts in all instances. And what that'll do is it means that you can simply copy paste the output that your language model provides and copy it all in one blast. You don't need to worry about lining it up or putting in the exact method. Word of a caution here is that real programmers laugh at this because oftentimes the mistake might be so simple to fix, it's just literally deleting a bracket or changing it. And instead you're gonna get the language model to rerun an entire script, but you don't care. You're just interested in getting the emoji that works. And so you're gonna use this iterative incremental process to keep telling the language model to pumping out full scripts that you can copy over and replace until it works. Okay, so the next key step is you're going to test whether or not the incremental prompt and the output that your language model provided and your attempt to implement it in Unity, did it work? And this is really so key. Again, along with incremental prompting, the testing after your incremental prompt is so key because it really doesn't matter whether you know what the code is or not. And this is why I use emojis to teach this, because for all intents and purposes, the code is just sunglasses guy, cool guy with sunglasses, and heart emoji. And you did your best to put that in. And whether you understand what those emojis mean or not, it doesn't matter. All you're going to test for is, does it work? Does the thing that I wanted it to do work? So whether that was changing some aesthetic update, whether that was adding a button, whether it was adding a homepage, or whatever it is. In Unity, there is a play button. There's a way to just load your product that you're creating, whether it's a game or an app. And you can go and see, did whatever the instructions that your language model gave you, plus the code that you implemented, did it work? And you should be trying to fail. You should be trying to make it fail. It's sort of like having a hypothesis. You want to falsify the hypothesis. And if the code does not work, that's okay. And it probably won't work. There'll probably be compile errors. There will probably be something that you missed because you're an amateur. And that's actually totally fine. As that brings us to our next step, which is you're going to refine. So you start with your context prompt. Then you start with an incremental prompt. Then you test whether or not your incremental prompt works. And then you refine based on the results of your test. So if you test and it works, great, you're done and you can skip this step. But more often than not, there's probably something that got missed because you're an amateur, or just in general, that's kind of how coding frequently works. And when that's the case with the refinement, that's totally okay. This is part of the process. What you're going to do is go back to the language model and you're going to describe to the best of your ability exactly what it is that you're seeing and what is the error that is occurring. Now, there are a million different ways for how you can let your language model know about the problem that may be occurring in your Unity editor. There are these debug logs that you can share. You can share versions of the scripts, or you can even just describe things qualitatively about what may or may not be working. None of the specifics really matter. What you're really just trying to do is give the language model eyes into the editor, into the engine, so that it can get a sense of what may be going wrong. And more often than not, it will have a sense of these things. So this is frequent patterns that it's pulling on. That's why it's a language model. And it can often find out what it is that was a mistake, or it can give you subsequent questions or tasks to follow up on to correct it. But either way, this is all part of the same step, which is the refinement step, that you iteratively keep trying to diagnose the problem and work with the language model prompt after prompt to say, hey, this isn't working. And then it'll give you a later solution, and then you implement that solution. And this is kind of funny. There's a lot of memes online. You'll see people who get mad at their language models, where you get so frustrated. You're like, look, I've told you for the 100th time that this isn't working and your code sucks, and I'm super angry. But it really is, if you've set it up correctly with your previous prompts, this is sort of where the heart and soul of vibe coding takes place. It's in this refinement process. But again, this further emphasizes the importance of doing incremental, because the smaller, the more isolated, whatever it is that you're asking, the easier it is to sort of debug, or to sort of describe and to sort of test about whether or not this is working or not. So you're going to keep on refining until hopefully you get a working version. So after you finally get the cool guy with sunglasses and heart emoji version of your game or app fully working, you're going to save that in Unity, and you're going to save the version in GitHub. And congratulations, you've completed the first cycle of prompt engineering or vibe coding. And basically now you're just going to repeat, and you're going to go to your second iterative prompt, which we can now say is the snake emoji. So you'll now have cool guy with sunglasses, heart, and snake emoji version of your game or app that you're developing. And the great thing about this approach now, especially using GitHub, which is why it's so important to set up, is no matter how badly the snake emoji version of code that you're now going to be updating your game with, if it totally breaks everything, well, you can easily revert back to cool guy with sunglasses and heart emoji version of the game, which you got to work. So you do all this work to refine it, and then you can save it. It's a real sigh of relief, particularly when you're coding, because coding doesn't have the same version control as just like a Word doc. There's a lot of different files and assets across different areas of your computer. So if you're not careful, and if you don't use GitHub, you can actually lose all of that, and you can't just get it back as easily as you could from getting back a Word document version. In any event, you save cool guy with sunglasses and heart emoji, and that will forever be in the cloud on GitHub. That's the safe version you can always return to. And then subsequent iterations of the next incremental prompt that you want to work on, you can now easily implement and follow the same approach of following the instructions, adding the code to Unity, and then refining it. And once that refinement goes on for a little bit, you probably need a little bit of back and forth, but once you finally get that locked in, then that version of your Unity game or app or whatever it is you're developing gets saved into GitHub. You save it in Unity. And now the cool guy with sunglasses, the heart emoji, and the snake emoji version of your game is completely working. And you will repeat this again and again and again. And what I mean to show with the emojis is that I haven't once talked about code here. I haven't once mentioned any type of C# or any type of code whatsoever. And really, there are ways that you can easily copy paste some of the code. So I'll show you in my own example how you can actually still work with the code. I'm not suggesting you ignore it. You don't have to hate the code, but I am suggesting that it doesn't matter with this approach. You don't have to know a thing about the coding, because you are simply just incremental prompting and you're testing. And once the test is successful, that's all that matters. So the code could be anything. It could be emojis. It could be symbols. It could be, a different language. It really doesn't matter. All that matters is that the current version works, and the risk is totally mitigated with version control, because even though you have no idea what's going on, so if your language model gives you a set of code that is totally different and totally breaks everything, it doesn't matter. You can always revert back to an earlier version of your game or your app, and you'll be safe. And so this is really the heart and soul of vibe coding. And it is this incremental approach with testing and refinement and version control to save it back to the earlier version. And you just repeat this again and again until, before you know it, you will have a game or an app in place. And I know this because this is the approach that I used. Okay, so to fully contextualize this, I'm going to show you an example of how I can use this approach for my own game. So my own game is completely done, but there are aspects that I'm still kind of working on to improve and make it even better. So I'm going to walk you through step by step how I use this exact approach to refine my card game, Poison Water Wine. And you'll see it's very much what I described, and I don't have to have any coding ability whatsoever. I just have to follow this approach.